Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Art Like Everything Else, the podcast where I use art to talk about literally everything else. I'm your host, Mo, and today I wanted to talk about kindness, but not just any type of kindness. I wanted to talk about kindness explicitly as a form of nonconformity. And so I want to use two pieces of art to do that. So let's hop right on over and talk about our first work of art. Righty, so for our first work of art, we're going to be talking about the movie Dead Poet Society. So this movie was released in 1989, and it was written by Tom Shulman and directed by Peter Weir. And so this movie, for those who would like a 100% spoiler-free watch of the movie, I'm going to read you the description per IMDb, and then we'll get right into talking about the movie. But per usual, I won't give away so much of the movie that it is completely unwatchable if you haven't seen it. And so yeah, feel free to enjoy it. Feel free to pause here, enjoy it, and come back. Or feel free to enjoy it after completing today's podcast episode. So with that being said, per IMDb, the Dead Poet Society is about maverick teacher John Keating returns in 1959 to the prestigious New England boys' boarding school where he was once a star student, using poetry to embolden his pupils to new heights of self-expression. And so, pretty much, that's kind of exactly a lot of what's going on in this movie, and I want to highlight the teacher, John Keating, specifically. And so John Keating is doing something rather unique for all of these students in that his kindness to them and showing them that they are people that do exist outside of simply being extensions of the society at large and extensions of their parents. He's showing them that they are people too. And he's giving and offering them a level of kindness that's probably unheard of, especially in 1959. In instilling in them that they are people, that they exist, and that they are allowed to have dreams and have desires outside of what it is that their parents want for them, outside of whatever it is that their parents are expecting of them. And he treats them like people and not just like potential cogs in a machine. Because you can see this sort of contrast between John Keating, that teacher, and all of their other teachers who are simply like, you need to do this way, this. And he's just like, well, what do you think? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? What is important to you or important that, like, what do you value? What is it that you want to see in this world? What is it that makes you feel alive? And he encourages them to explore that and explore themselves and kind of try to come to terms with what it is they might like, expressing and telling them explicitly. Even there's a scene in the movie where he's talking exactly about the pressure to conform in a society that makes it easy to conform. And I thought it was really powerful to be telling students this, to be sharing with them and telling them explicitly that, like, hey, you are a person, you exist outside of what it is everybody expects of you. Do you like that person? And try to be someone you would like. And I think that's really, really cool and really, really powerful. And I will talk about it more in our conversation. But before we can get to our conversation, let's talk about our next work of art. Alrighty, so for our next work of art, I'm actually going to be talking about the movie The Iron Giant. Now, The Iron Giant came out in 1999, and this movie was directed by Brad Bird. The screenplay was written by Brad Bird and Tim McCanless, and the story is by Brad Bird. So it is based off of a children's story by Tom Hughes, but we don't have to go into the specifics of it. If you'd like to know more, feel free to research about where the Iron Giant comes from. It's really fascinating. But with that being said, I do want to talk about this movie in particular, and I'm going to read you the description per IMDb in case you like a 100% spoiler-free watch of the movie. And then after that, I'm going to get into talking a bit about the movie and how it relates to today's conversation. And per usual, I won't give away every single detail, so it will be possible to enjoy even after today's episode. So feel free to watch it whenever you would like. With that being said, per IMDb, The Iron Giant is about a young boy who befriends a giant robot from outer space that a paranoid government agent wants to destroy. And that is a pretty good description of a lot of what's happening in the movie. Of course, there's more, and especially regarding to today's conversation. So a character in this movie I'd like to highlight, there's actually a couple characters I think I want to highlight, and it is the boy, Hogarth, and the giant robot. So in this movie, we see Hogarth, who's exhibiting a level of kindness that's, I feel, really isn't too uncommon for children. Something really, really cool is that, like, even though he is going at about everything as a child, there's still a level of kindness in all of his actions. He's someone who's really curious and interested in, like, little creatures and things of that nature. He wants to try to save and help little things and little people. And he has this vivid imagination. And then he comes across the Iron Giant. And so the Iron Giant, he helps as a child. He helps the Iron Giant, who is also in its own way a bit childlike, because it arrives with a dent on its head. And so I guess there can be some assumption that I guess it doesn't have all of its memory functions or whatever. And in working with the giant and showing the giant around, he shows that, like, he tells the giant that, like, weapons harm people and weapons do hurt, and the giant sort of absorbs that and also wants to not hurt other people and not go out of its way to do things that hurt people. And so much, in fact, that it does go out of its way to try to save people and save other things. And it's really, really cool. It's a good movie. I like the movie. I watched it when I was a child. I watch it on occasion every now and then, even as an adult. It's a really good movie, and I do think more people should watch it. But with that being said, I do think we can kind of, especially in this movie, we see a lot of the kindness and how existing in a way that goes against all that people are expecting, which is in, like, that nonconformity, and how that even that can be dangerous. And I do want to go a bit further into that in today's conversation. So let's have today's conversation. So, kindness and nonconformity. Honestly, if I'm being honest, what inspired today's conversation was I more or less realized that, like, all of the kindness people that I see in my day-to-day life are not exactly conforming to a lot of the expectations of the world around them. And I thought that was really fascinating. And something I see, it sort of reminded me of this was, like, an incident when I was on the bus, and, like, I think I was heading home, and this mother and child got on the bus, and there was nowhere for them to sit. And so I saw someone got up to let them sit down, and they were dressed in a very, like, non-traditional, non sort of like conformist sort of like way. And I was just like, that's actually something I notice a lot of, like, the people exhibiting the most kindness are someone who is non-conformist in a way. And I do think kindness in itself, in a society like the one we live in today, is nonconformity, because there is an expectation that we be cruel. There is an expectation that we only look out for ourselves and that we do not consider the collective at large or what the people next to us might be going through. But being kind goes against all of that. And I think it is important that we consider those around us and also be nonconformists in that same way. So, like, we see it in Dead Poet Society, in which John Keating, he also went to that school. So he knows what is expected of everyone that is at that school. And yet, even still, he's like, I want to teach these children to be people. I want them to do what it is they desire. I want them to learn about themselves. I don't want them to simply be cogs in a machine. I want them to be able to think for themselves. And then we see in The Iron Giant, where this robot that is assumed to be evil actually is good. That, like, and honestly, in the movie, we do see, like, the robot got that stuff on him, and he's very much capable of causing an immense amount of harm, and yet he chooses not to. he chooses to do what he can to help people. And that's just like people today. We do have the capability to harm. We do have the ability to hurt others because it's expected of us. There's this idea that like if you do not put yourself first, if you do not consider only you and your immediate people, that everything else will get in the way or everything else is trying to take that away from you. And that's not the case. I think we're told that because it makes it easier to get people to do what society wants by having all the infighting happening amongst those very people. So it's like there is this expectation. It's like, oh, they want what you have. You have to protect everything that you have so that they don't steal it from you. And the reality is, those folks probably do not want to steal anything from you. Those folks don't want to steal anything from you. They want their needs met. You want your needs met. And the people able to make those needs met are telling you the reason those needs are not being met is because of the people right next to you. That's not the case. And it's because they also tell us to not be, to like exist in this way, to not be kind, to not consider our neighbors, that we are often able to continue or made to continue to believe that because they want what we have, we can't get what it is we want, when the person who has the ability to do what it is that we want is not the person right next to us. It's the person telling us that the reason we can't have it is because of the person next to us. And so I think it's really important that we instill in ourselves and indeed do have kindness as rebellion. Now that I'm thinking on it, I think I've done an episode on this before already.
A few moments later.
I think I just talk about this sentiment of kindness a lot in my daily life. I thought I previously spoke about this, but even if I did, there's nothing wrong with speaking about it again. And so I do think kindness is just very important, especially to us as people. It's going to be what keeps us going in the long run, ultimately. I do think something I noticed and that I found incredibly concerning, especially when it comes to like this idea of kindness is nonconformity, is that like the people who are telling you to not be kind to others, the people who are telling you to abide and to conform, often do not care about the harms that comes with said conformity, or the harm that comes, or what said conformity will put in harm's way. So like we see that in both movies. So in the Dead Poet Society, we see the way in which parents are literally upset at the idea of their child thinking for themselves and deciding that they want to do something that the parent does not want to do, that they do not care how distraught or how distressing that makes their child. They do not care that it upsets them. They do not care about any of this. And then we see in The Iron Giant that the government agent that wants to get rid of the Iron Giant does so in such a way that it quite literally puts everyone in that town in danger. He doesn't care that the giant is actually kind. He doesn't care that the giant goes against all that it is he actually believes is the case. He says because it goes against what he wants or what he believes is like functional or capable or possible in the world he exists in, it needs to be destroyed, and he doesn't care who gets in the way of him trying to destroy said thing. And so there's so much harm and so much pressure to keep people who would like to nonconform, who would like to go against the grain, that they do not care how much it would hurt someone else or who will be put in harm's way by going against the conformity. Which is why I think it's really important that more of us do this thing. I think it's important that we all talk about and we all sort of invest into being nonconformists by being kind to one another, by being kind to those around us and to those who we might not know. I think it's really easy to believe we live in a world where no one cares about one another when the people who are telling us what is and isn't possible tell us that like, hey, you can only look out for yourself. You cannot look out for your neighbor. You cannot consider what it is your neighbor might need or what you are able to help your neighbor with. You and you alone are supposed to be the arbiter and the ruler of you and your, what will ever be considered your dominion. And so in a lot of Western societies, that's you and your immediate family. Anyone outside of that, you do not need to consider. And that often also includes friends. It's like there's this idea that like you are not allowed to help those in your community. You are not allowed or not expected to because that would take away from your own resources. And it's really isolating and a lonely way to feel. And I'm not surprised if that exact thinking is more or less why there's this sort of diasporic feeling of like what used to be where like hey, it used to be possible to be in community with those next to you. It used to be possible to be in community and to feel like you were a part of a neighborhood or a part of a community, a part of a system that worked together to help other people. And as the years have gone by, it's like everything's just become much more stratified, and it's harder to feel like you're able to connect with someone else because they believe like, oh, I only need to focus on what is mine and what is right in front of me. And I cannot consider what I might be able to help my neighbor with or what I might be able to help a community member with. Because if they're not able to help me, I should not consider anything at all to do with them. And that is just a very lonely and isolated way to live. I think it's just important that we choose to be good in a world that tells us to be harmful and tells us to be selfish and tells us to be against whatever it is our neighbors might want or desire or also need. That could be in tangent with what we want, desire, and also need. I think there's more than enough kindness for it to go around for the entire world, and that we ought to just literally embrace that and take that to heart and listen and be nonconformist in that way. So maybe, just maybe, being nonconformist and exhibiting kindness too can be in art, like everything else. Last and certainly not least is this week's Awe Moment. So for those new, the Awe Moment is simply just more art that I like to talk about that sometimes ties into the conversation at hand and sometimes it doesn't. So today I wanted to talk about the movie The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. And so this movie was also based on a book called the same name, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. So the book was illustrated and written by Charlie McKeesey, and it was released in 2019. The movie didn't come out till 2022. It's only about 34 minutes long, but it's a really, really beautiful film. I love the artwork. I love the message. It's pretty much just adventures of this little boy with these animals, and they're talking about like just vulnerability, kindness, hope, friendship, and love. And they're all so really nice and poignant. And I wanted to talk about something that happens in the movie that I think is really beautiful. That's probably one of my favorite scenes in this movie is that the boy and the mole, they're sitting in the tree, and the mole asks the little boy, he's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the little boy says, kind. And I think if we moved in a way like this, I'm pretty sure I've spoken about this before, but I love the movie, so let's talk about it again. If we spoke about this or looked at living and existing at sort of similar to the way this kid is, I think we would live in a kinder world. I'm currently a teacher, and all of my students are actually incredibly kind. I've noticed that is sort of just a facet of children, at least all the children I've interacted with. They're all really kind and really nice. And I think it says something about the state of the world that, like, the world we exist in now, even with all of the adults and all the people that exist, the most kindness I often see happening is among children and not the adults that ultimately, kind of like I've been talking about, have been made aware or forced into conforming into society at large that tells them to not be kind, to not consider other people, to not do or be or exist in a way that would go against what it is the world or the society wants or tells you. But it is possible to return to that. And I think at the where I'm at now, if asked what do I want to be when I grow up, I would say kind, because kindness is simply at the top or at the forefront of all of the things that I do desire or that I do think would be really, really cool to exhibit. And in a world that is telling you to be unkind, to not consider others, or to be incredibly selfish, I think it's really cool to be kind, to go against what is expected of you, and to be nonconformist, even if only in that way. And I like nonconformity. I think it's cool to not always do what is expected of you. And cruelty isn't an expectation in the day and age we live in, and I don't like being cruel or being told to be cruel. And so, yeah, that's actually all I have for you today. If you would like to follow for more, feel free to follow me on my personal. So on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, I am at The Lovely Infinite. And then on TikTok and Instagram, you can follow my art collective, VCMP Collective, where I do highlight new artists, and I also highlight resources and places where you can learn about art. So if you would like to know more about art, or you would like to check out new artists or up and coming artists, or just check out people you may not have even heard of before, follow that account, the CMP Collective. And then you can also follow, of course, Art Like Studios. So Art Like Studios is where you'll get all your updates on the podcast and any other workings or projects by me. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.